The morning light slipped through the tall glass windows of the office building, reflecting off the polished floors. Inside, people hurried to their desks carrying their coffee cups and laptops. It was a normal start to a busy workday. Phones were ringing, printers were running, and keyboards clicked without pause. At the corner of the lobby, a young man quietly mopped the floor. His name was Adil. He wore a plain blue uniform and old shoes that had lost their shine long ago. His face carried a calm expression, neither happy nor sad, as if he had accepted his place in this fast-moving world. He didn't speak much. Every morning he would arrive early, clean the offices, and make sure everything was in order before the staff arrived. No one really noticed him. People walked past him like he was part of the furniture. Some even left their coffee cups or food wrappers on the tables without saying thank you, assuming he would clean it later. Adil never complained. He simply smiled, picked up the trash, and continued with his work. The office manager, Mr. Rao, was known for his short temper. He liked control and perfection. Every file had to be in the right place. Every chair had to face the right direction, and every word spoken to him had to sound respectful. He was proud of his title and enjoyed reminding people that he was the one who made everything run smoothly. To Mr. Rao, people like Adil were invisible. He believed cleaners and helpers were at the bottom of the ladder, and they should just do their job quietly. Whenever he saw Adil, he rarely greeted him. Sometimes, if something was slightly out of place, he would call out sharply, "Hey boy, come fix this." Adil would nod politely and do as told. He never talked back. He never argued. His calmness almost annoyed Mr. Rao even more. One day, a small group of new employees joined the office. They were young and full of energy. During their first week, they noticed how Adil moved around silently, keeping everything clean while others ignored him. One of them, a kind woman named Hina, offered him a smile one morning and said, "Good morning." Adil looked surprised but smiled back and replied softly, "Good morning, ma'am." From that day, Hina started greeting him every morning. Sometimes she even asked if he had eaten or needed a break. Adil appreciated the kindness, though he never spoke much about himself. He was always respectful but distant, like someone carrying a secret he didn't want to share. Mr. Rao, however, didn't like when employees paid too much attention to the cleaning staff. He once told Hina, "You're too soft-hearted. People like him get paid to clean, not to be your friends." Hina didn't respond, but inside she felt disappointed. Adil continued doing his job the same way every day. He worked through lunch breaks, cleaned quietly after meetings, and sometimes stayed late when others had already gone home. When he finished his work, he would sit in the lobby for a few minutes, looking out through the glass doors at the city lights. Then he would stand up, put his cleaning tools away, and leave. No one knew where he went after work. Some thought he lived nearby in a small rented room. Others assumed he took a bus far away to a cheaper area. Nobody really asked. One morning, something unusual happened. Mr. Rao arrived earlier than usual and noticed a small fingerprint smudge on the glass window of his cabin. It was barely visible, but his perfectionist nature made him furious. He called out loudly, "Where's that cleaner?" "What's his name, Adil?" A few employees looked up from their desks as Adil hurried to the manager's office, holding a cleaning cloth in his hand. He stood at the door, calm as always, and said softly, "Yes, sir?" Mr. Rao pointed at the window. "What is this? You call this clean? You people have one job to do and you can't even do it right." Adil stepped closer, looked at the smudge, and said gently, "I'll clean it again, sir. Sorry about that, but Mr. Rao wasn't done." He raised his voice, almost shouting, "Sorry? You're useless. This is an office, not a street shop. If you can't handle your work properly, then leave. There are hundreds waiting to take your job." The entire floor fell silent. People pretended to look at their screens, but everyone could hear the manager's voice. Hina looked up with shock, wanting to say something, but Adil's calm face stopped her. Adil didn't defend himself. He simply wiped the window again, slower this time, making sure it shined perfectly. Then he turned, looked at Mr. Rao with a quiet smile, and said softly, "It won't happen again, sir." Mr. Rao waved his hand dismissively. "Get out of my sight," he said, and went back to his computer. Adil walked out quietly, picked up his bucket, and went back to work. He didn't look angry. He didn't look sad. He just looked peaceful, as if none of it mattered. But Hina noticed something in his eyes that day, a depth that didn't fit someone who was just a cleaner. During lunch, some employees whispered about the scene. One said, "Poor guy, he didn't deserve that." Another replied, "Yeah, but he should have done his job properly." The discussion went on for a few minutes before everyone got back to their work, forgetting the whole thing, but Hina couldn't forget. Later that evening, when most people had gone home, she saw Adil still working. He was cleaning the hall, humming softly to himself. She approached him and said, "You didn't deserve what happened today. Mr. Rao shouldn't have spoken like that." Adil smiled and said, "It's okay. I'm used to it, but it's not right," she insisted. "You work so hard. Why let people treat you like that?" Adil looked at her kindly. "Ma'am, some people only see what's in front of them. They don't see the whole picture." "That's life." His words surprised her. There was something wise and grounded in the way he said it. She wanted to ask more, but he picked up his mop and continued cleaning. The next few days passed quietly. Mr. Rao didn't speak to Adil much, though he still carried the same arrogant attitude. Adil worked as usual, never missing a day, never complaining. Every morning, Hina greeted him, and he always returned the greeting with a gentle smile. Then one Friday, something strange happened. Around noon, a few people in expensive suits came to the office. They spoke with the company director and asked to see the manager. Everyone noticed the sudden tension in the air. The visitors looked serious, holding thick folders and legal documents. Mr. Rao came out of his office, shook hands with them, and led them to the conference room. People whispered, wondering who they were. Some thought they were auditors. Others guessed they were investors. Adil watched quietly from a distance, wiping a nearby table. He didn't say a word, but there was a faint smile on his face. A smile no one could read. When the meeting ended, the director came out looking surprised but respectful. He called a few senior employees to join him, and together they prepared a document for signing. The visitors congratulated them and left. Later that day, Mr. Rao gathered the staff and said proudly, "Good news, everyone. The building has been sold to a new investor. But don't worry. Everything will continue as normal. We'll just have a new owner to deal with." People clapped politely, but inside they were curious. Who was the new owner? No one had any idea. As the day ended, Adil quietly packed his cleaning supplies as usual. He walked past the same people who ignored him every day. No one noticed that he stopped at the reception desk for a few moments, signing a small piece of paper left for him by the lawyer who had come earlier. He then folded it neatly and put it in his pocket. When Hina said goodbye that evening, Adil smiled and said, "You might want to come early on Monday. I think next week will be interesting." She laughed softly. "Why do you say that?" He just smiled again and said, "Sometimes things change when you least expect them." Then he walked out into the night. Outside, the city lights glowed bright against the sky. The tall building he had just cleaned stood proudly among others, shining under the streetlights. Adil looked up at it for a few seconds, his expression unreadable. Then he turned and walked away, his figure disappearing into the crowd of people heading home. No one in that office, not even the proud manager, knew that the useless cleaner they looked down on owned more than they could imagine. But the time for that truth to come out was very near. Monday morning came faster than anyone expected. The office was buzzing with energy as people shared their weekend stories, drank coffee and laughed before the manager's usual round of inspection began. Everything seemed normal until whispers about the new building owner started spreading again. Rumors were flying around the office. Some said the new owner was a big businessman from another city. Others said it was a retired politician. Nobody knew the truth, but everyone had their theories. Adil entered quietly as always, holding his cleaning cloth and small bucket. He walked through the lobby, wiping tables and arranging chairs while the employees continued gossiping around him. He smiled softly when someone accidentally dropped a paper cup, picked it up and moved on without a word. The manager, Mr. Rao, was in his usual mood, strict and controlling. He inspected the floors and pointed at small things that bothered him. The blinds aren't straight. The reception desk is dusty. Does no one take pride in their work here? He complained loudly. He spotted Adil cleaning near the meeting room and called out, "Hey you, come here, these floors look dull. I told you to polish them every week. What are you doing all day?" Adil stopped, looked down for a second, and then said quietly, "I did polish them last Friday, sir." "Maybe it's the lighting," Mr. Rao interrupted sharply. "Don't make excuses. You're just lazy. If you can't handle a simple task, I'll find someone who can." Several people nearby turned their heads. Hina, sitting at her desk, clenched her jaw. She wanted to say something but stopped herself. She had learned that arguing with Mr. Rao never changed anything. It only made things worse for the other person. Adil didn't respond. He just nodded and said softly, "I'll clean it again, sir." Then he bent down, started polishing the same area carefully, and stayed silent while the manager walked away shaking his head. There was something different about Adil that morning, though. His calmness seemed deeper, almost like he was waiting for something. Every time someone shouted or rushed past him, he just smiled quietly to himself as if he knew something others didn't. Around noon, an announcement came through the office speakers. The receptionist said, "All department heads and staff are requested to gather in the main hall at 12:30 p.m. for an important meeting regarding the new building ownership." The room immediately filled with chatter. Everyone was curious. Even Mr. Rao looked slightly nervous, adjusting his tie and combing his hair neatly. "I hope this new owner understands how this office works," he muttered to one of his assistants. "I can't stand people who interfere with management." Adil continued his work quietly, sweeping near the corridor as people rushed to finish their tasks before the meeting. By noon, everyone gathered in the main hall. The atmosphere was filled with whispers and excitement. The company director stood at the front with a few people from the legal team. He looked pleased but a little tense. Mr. Rao stood confidently beside him, thinking this was his moment to impress the new owner. He even rehearsed a small speech in his mind about how efficiently he managed the staff and maintained order in the building. At 12:35, the doors opened. A group of men in suits entered, followed by a lawyer holding a folder of documents. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to see who the new owner was, and then, from behind them, Adil walked in. At first, people thought he was just there to clean up after the meeting. But when the lawyer greeted him respectfully and handed him a file, the room went completely still. Mr. Rao's confident expression froze. The director smiled nervously and said, "Everyone, I'd like to introduce the new owner of this building, Mr. Adil Khan." You could hear the sound of gasps spreading through the room. Some people looked confused, others in complete shock. Mr. Rao blinked several times, not sure if he had heard correctly. "Excuse me," he said, his voice shaking slightly. Adil looked calm as ever. He gave a polite nod and stepped forward. "Good afternoon, everyone," he said softly but clearly. "Yes, it's true. From today, I'll be the new owner of this building. But don't worry, everything will continue as usual. The company can keep using the space without any disturbance." A heavy silence filled the air. The employees were trying to process what they just heard. The same man they saw cleaning floors every day, the one who quietly nodded when insulted, was actually the building's new owner. Mr. Rao tried to smile, but his face was pale. "This must be some kind of misunderstanding," he stammered. "You're the cleaner here. You've been working for me, under me, for months." Adil looked at him with calm eyes. "You're right, sir. I did work here. I cleaned the floors, emptied the trash, and made sure this office looked presentable every day. It was good work. I learned a lot about people here." The lawyer beside him confirmed. "The ownership transfer was completed last week. Mr. Khan's family trust now holds full ownership of the property. All rental agreements will continue under his name." Mr. Rao's mouth went dry. The employees were stunned. Some looked at Adil with new respect, others with guilt for how they had ignored or overlooked him before. Adil continued, "I didn't come here today to embarrass anyone. I just want to thank everyone who treated me kindly while I worked here. This place taught me the value of humility, patience, and respect." He looked directly at the manager for a moment but said nothing more. His silence said everything. After the meeting ended, everyone stayed behind, whispering in disbelief. Some said, "How did we not know?" Others said, "He was so quiet you'd never guess." Hina walked up to Adil with a big smile. "So this was the surprise you were talking about?" she asked softly. Adil laughed a little. "Yes, I guess so. I didn't mean to shock everyone this much." "You really owned the whole building all along?" she asked, still amazed. He nodded. "My father bought it years ago. When he passed away, I inherited it. But before taking responsibility for it, I wanted to understand how people are treated at different levels. I wanted to see the world from the ground up, not from an office chair." Hina looked at him with admiration. "That's incredible. You went through all that just to understand people?" Adil smiled. Yes, you can't learn respect from books or speeches. You learn it from how you treat others, especially when you think they can't offer you anything in return. Mr. Rao stayed inside his office for hours after the meeting. He couldn't face anyone. His arrogance had been shattered completely. The same man he once called useless now owned the very building he worked in. He replayed every rude comment in his mind, feeling smaller each time. That evening, Adil walked past his office. Mr. Rao stood up immediately. Sir, I want to apologize for how I behaved, he said nervously. I didn't know who you were. Adil stopped at the door, his voice gentle but firm. You don't need to apologize for not knowing who I am. But you should think about how you treat people, even when you believe they're below you. That's what really matters. Mr. Rao lowered his head. You're right, he said quietly. I was wrong. Adil smiled faintly. It's never too late to change, he said, and then walked away. The next few days felt completely different. People greeted Adil with warmth and respect, though he never acted superior. He still smiled the same way, spoke softly, and treated everyone with kindness. He didn't sit in an office or demand special treatment. He told the company they could continue renting the building under the same conditions. Nothing would change except one thing: respect. He told the management team, I don't want anyone here treated poorly because of their job title. Every role is important. A manager can't work in a dirty office, and a cleaner can't do his job if others make a mess. Everyone depends on each other. The message spread quickly. Even Mr. Rao began treating his staff with more care. He greeted the cleaning team politely every morning and even helped arrange chairs before meetings. People noticed the difference. As weeks passed, the office atmosphere changed completely. Laughter replaced tension. The workers who once ignored the cleaner now offered him tea and asked about his day. They learned that respect didn't need to come from status. It came from heart. One evening, when most employees had gone home, Hina found Adil standing in the empty lobby, looking around quietly. You're not going to stop cleaning, are you? She teased. Adil chuckled. Old habits die hard, he said. Besides, it keeps me grounded, she smiled. You've changed so many lives here, you know? He looked thoughtful. Maybe. But sometimes people just need a small reminder. The world becomes a better place when we see each other as equals. The lights reflected on the polished floor, shining like the start of something new. For the first time, the building felt truly alive. Not because of its walls or offices, but because of the respect that finally filled its rooms. Days turned into weeks, and life inside the office slowly began to change. Ever since the day the truth came out, people looked at Adil with new eyes. But the surprising thing was that Adil didn't change at all. He still dressed simply, still greeted everyone with a polite smile, and still moved around the building as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The employees, however, were more aware of their behavior now. Even the ones who used to ignore the cleaning staff began saying good morning or thank you. The small acts of kindness spread quietly, changing the whole mood of the workplace. The manager, Mr. Rao, struggled the most. He carried a heavy feeling of guilt every time he saw Adil. The memory of his harsh words echoed in his head, especially the moment he called him useless. It kept him awake some nights. He couldn't believe how blind he had been. One morning, as Adil entered the building, he found Mr. Rao waiting near the entrance. It was unusual. The manager was never there that early. When Adil greeted him, Mr. Rao said, "Good morning, sir." In a low, nervous voice, Adil smiled lightly. "Good morning, Mr. Rao. You don't have to call me sir, I'm still the same Adil." Mr. Rao shook his head. "No, you're not the same. You own this place. I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I treated you unfairly, and I can't forgive myself for it." Adil looked at him calmly and said, "You don't have to keep thinking about it. The past can't be changed, but the present can." Mr. Rao sighed. "I will try my best to be a better person from now on." Adil nodded. "That's all that matters." Then he walked inside, greeting the security guard and the receptionist like he always did. People who passed by still found it hard to believe that the humble man walking among them was the building's owner. Later that week, Adil asked the company's director for a short meeting. He had something in mind. When they sat down, Adil said, "I want to make a few improvements to the building. It's old and some things could be upgraded for everyone's comfort." The director looked surprised. Of course, we'd appreciate that. What kind of improvements do you mean? Adil smiled. Simple things. Better chairs for the cleaners and guards. A proper dining area for all staff, not just the management team. Maybe a small resting room for those who work long hours. The director nodded, impressed. You're very thoughtful, Mr. Khan. Most owners only care about rent. Adil replied softly. People take care of this place every day. They deserve to feel respected here. Within a month, new furniture arrived. The staff kitchen got renovated. The cleaning staff received proper uniforms and storage space. For the first time, the people who had always been invisible felt valued. One afternoon, the employees gathered in the break room for tea. The mood was light. Some were laughing, others sharing stories about the old days when they used to ignore the cleaners or take them for granted. Hina, who had always been kind to Adil, said, You know, I still can't believe he worked among us without saying anything. A colleague replied, That's what makes him different. Most people show off what they have. He didn't need to. Meanwhile, Adil was walking through the hallway inspecting some repair work. When he saw the team struggling to move heavy boxes, he immediately went to help them. The workers tried to stop him. Sir, please, you don't have to do this, one said quickly. Adil smiled. It's fine. I have two hands just like you. They laughed together as they carried the boxes. To them, Adil wasn't just a boss or owner. He was a good man. But even though things were improving, not everyone was at peace. Mr. Rao found it hard to face his team. For years, he had managed them through fear, not respect. Now he was trying to change, but some people still looked at him with doubt. One day, during a staff meeting, he decided to speak openly. I want to say something, he began. Many of you know how I used to be. I shouted too much. I disrespected people who didn't deserve it. I've realized how wrong that was. I want to start again properly this time. There was silence for a few seconds. Then Hina clapped, followed by others. The atmosphere softened. People appreciated the courage it took for him to admit his mistakes. Adil was standing quietly in the back of the room, smiling to himself. He didn't say anything, but he knew that moment was the beginning of real change. Later that evening, Adil went to the rooftop of the building. It was his favorite spot. The city below was full of lights, and the sound of cars echoed softly. He stood there for a while, lost in thought. He remembered the days he spent cleaning the same offices where people ignored him. He remembered the times he ate lunch alone in a corner, because no one wanted to sit beside the cleaner. But he also remembered the few who showed kindness, small gestures that meant a lot. He realized that every experience had taught him something valuable. It wasn't just about business or ownership. It was about understanding people and learning how fragile dignity could be when it wasn't respected. The next morning, Adil called a meeting with the building staff, the guards, cleaners, and maintenance workers. They gathered in the small lobby area, curious about what he wanted to say. Adil looked around and said warmly, I worked with all of you not long ago. I know how hard this job is. I've seen how people look past you when you do your work quietly, but that doesn't mean your work is small. Without you, this building wouldn't function for a single day. I want you all to know that I respect what you do. The workers clapped softly. Some even smiled with pride. For many of them, it was the first time anyone had said such words to them. After the meeting, one of the older janitors approached him. Sir, we've never had an owner who spoke to us like this. You've given us respect. Thank you. Adil placed a hand on the man's shoulder. No need to thank me. Just keep doing your job with pride. That's all I ask. As weeks went by, the building became known not just for its business offices, but for the positive environment inside. Visitors often commented on how clean and welcoming the place felt. Even clients noticed the cheerful attitude of the staff. One day, a man from another company visited for a meeting and saw Adil talking casually with a cleaner. Later, he asked the director, Who was that man? He seemed so grounded. The director smiled proudly. That's the owner of the building. The visitor looked stunned. Really? He talks like one of the employees. The director replied, That's exactly why everyone respects him. Meanwhile, Mr. Rao's transformation continued quietly. He was no longer the loud, impatient boss he used to be. He listened more, spoke gently, and even helped organize small appreciation events for the staff. One evening, as Adil was leaving, Mr. Rao caught up to him near the elevator. I wanted to thank you, he said sincerely. You changed the way I see things. I don't just mean work. I mean life, Adil smiled. Sometimes life gives us lessons in ways we don't expect. Mr. Rao nodded. It was a hard one, but I'm grateful for it. When the elevator door closed, Adil looked at his reflection in the metal wall. For a moment, he saw not the owner of a building, but the cleaner who once stood silently while being shouted at. He realized that true strength wasn't about power or position. It was about patience, humility, and how one responded to unfairness. That night, as he walked out of the building, the security guard greeted him warmly. "Good night, sir," he said. Adil smiled back. "Good night, brother. Take care." The guard's face lit up with happiness. Outside, the cool breeze brushed against Adil's face. He looked up at the building that had witnessed his quiet journey, from being insulted to being respected. But in his heart, he didn't feel like he had risen above anyone. He just felt thankful that life had allowed him to see the full circle of humanity, the pride, the cruelty, the kindness, and the change. As he walked away that night, the lights from the office windows followed him, shining brightly like a reminder that dignity and respect are worth more than any title or property. And deep inside, Adil knew his purpose was never just to own the building. It was to rebuild the values inside it. That evening, when the crowd in the office finally settled down after the big announcement, everyone had only one question in their mind. How could the man who used to clean their desks and floors turn out to be the owner of the building? No one had ever imagined such a thing. People had seen him every single day with a mop in his hand, quiet and gentle, never raising his voice or showing anger. And now he stood there like a completely different person, calm, confident, and yet the same humble man they had always known. After the meeting, Adil didn't rush to his car or act important. He stayed behind to greet people, answering their polite questions and thanking them for their work. He didn't seem proud or angry. He was just peaceful, as if nothing big had happened. But everyone around him couldn't stop whispering. The same man who used to eat alone in the corner of the cafeteria now owned the whole building. One of the kind employees, a woman named Nita, who had always treated him with respect, gathered the courage to ask him the truth. When the crowd began to thin out, she quietly walked up to him. "Sir?" she said softly, still not sure how to address him. "I hope you don't mind me asking, how did all this happen? We never knew anything about you." Adil smiled gently. "You can still call me Adil," he said. "And there's nothing to hide. I just never felt the need to tell anyone." He sat down at one of the empty desks and looked out the window for a moment before he began to speak. His voice was calm and steady. "A few years ago, my father passed away. He was a simple man, but he had a wise mind. He used to buy old buildings when no one wanted them and fix them up slowly. He believed that real value is not about how something looks today, but what it can become with care. After he was gone, I inherited a few of those places. This building was one of them." Nita listened quietly, her eyes wide. She couldn't believe it. Adil continued, "At first, I didn't want to sit behind a desk and call myself a landlord. I wanted to understand what people go through every day. I wanted to see how people treat others when they think no one is watching. So I started working here, not as the owner, but as a worker." He smiled again, not with pride, but with understanding. "I came here to learn, not to test anyone. I just wanted to see the world through another side." Nita nodded slowly. "You mean you were observing how people behave?" "Not in a bad way," he said softly. "I just believe that respect is something that doesn't depend on position. If you treat a worker kindly, it says more about your heart than your title. But not everyone sees it that way." There was silence for a few seconds. The office felt strangely peaceful. The sound of air conditioners and the distant clicking of keyboards filled the room. Nita finally said, "You could have told everyone. People would have treated you better." Adil looked at her with gentle eyes. "That's exactly why I didn't need special treatment. I wanted people to show who they really are. When someone treats you with kindness without expecting anything in return, that's real respect." He stood up and walked toward the big glass window, looking down at the parking lot where his car was waiting. "You see, when Mr. Rao shouted at me that day, calling me useless, I didn't feel angry. I just felt sorry for him, because someone who truly understands people would never say such words, no matter who's standing in front of them." Nita sighed. "He must feel awful now." "He probably does," Adil replied. "But that's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. Sometimes humiliation is what opens a person's eyes." I've been humiliated before, too. That's why I never forget where I came from." His words were calm, but they carried deep weight. Every sentence sounded like it came from experience, not pride. Nita realized this man wasn't trying to teach anyone a lesson. He had simply lived his truth quietly, and the truth spoke louder than any speech. Later that night, when Adil left the building, the security guards stood straighter than usual. They greeted him with warm smiles, and he greeted them back by name, the same way he always had. He didn't change his tone or behavior just because everyone now knew who he was. He still thanked the receptionist, still smiled at the guard, still walked out with his same soft step. Inside the office, however, everything had changed. People were still shocked. Some were embarrassed. The same employees who had laughed when the manager scolded Adil now felt ashamed of themselves. They remembered how they used to walk past him as if he didn't exist. Some recalled moments when he helped them pick up dropped papers or held the elevator for them, small gestures they never even noticed.
Now they wished they had said thank you. Mr. Rao, on the other hand, sat in his cabin long after everyone had gone.
He couldn't concentrate. The memory of that morning came back to him. The shouting, the angry words, the way Adil had stood silently without reacting. Now those same eyes haunted him. He felt something he hadn't felt in years, guilt. It burned quietly in his chest, making him restless. That night he didn't sleep. He kept thinking about what kind of person would accept such humiliation with so much patience. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how wrong he had been, not just to Adil but to others too. He had always treated workers as if they were beneath him, believing that power gave him the right to speak harshly. Now everything felt different. The next morning, the office had a strange energy. People spoke in whispers. Some were trying to find out if Adil was really coming back. Others were talking about how humble he seemed, despite being the building owner. Adil did return that day, but not in a fancy car. He came on foot, wearing his usual plain shirt, just like always. When he entered, everyone stood up unconsciously, even Mr. Rao. He smiled gently and said, "Please sit down. I'm not here for inspection. I just came to make sure everyone's doing fine." The staff relaxed a little, but Mr. Rao couldn't hide his discomfort. He stood there with a pale face, trying to gather the courage to speak. Adil noticed and gave him a small nod as if inviting him to talk. But Mr. Rao couldn't do it yet. His pride was still fighting his guilt. Later that day, Adil was in the cafeteria, sipping tea quietly when one of the office assistants approached him. "Sir," he said shyly, "we just wanted to say we're sorry. We should have treated you better." Adil smiled kindly. "You don't have to apologize. The important thing is that you understand. Life gives everyone a chance to learn something. This was yours. What matters is how you treat people from now on." He said it so naturally, without any trace of anger or superiority, that it left everyone speechless. It wasn't revenge or a lesson. It was forgiveness given freely. When Adil left that day, people watched him walk away in silence. For the first time, they didn't see a janitor or a boss. They saw a man with dignity. A man who didn't need to raise his voice to prove his worth. That evening, Nita found Mr. Rao sitting alone in his office. He looked lost. She walked in quietly and said, "Sir, maybe you should talk to him. I think he'll understand." Mr. Rao nodded weakly. "I will, I have to. I don't think I'll forgive myself otherwise." As the lights went off and the office emptied, everyone felt something had changed forever. It wasn't just about the new building owner. It was about realizing that titles, uniforms, and positions mean nothing if you forget to be kind. And somewhere in that quiet night, Adil's words echoed in everyone's mind. You don't have to prove your worth to anyone who can't see it. The next morning, the office felt different. People were still talking about what had happened, but the excitement had turned into quiet reflection. No one was gossiping anymore. Instead, they were thinking about how they had treated Adil all those months. The place that once buzzed with casual jokes and careless laughter now carried a sense of respect in the air. Even the sound of footsteps seemed softer, as if everyone had learned something important overnight. Mr. Rao, however, barely slept. His mind kept replaying the scene where he shouted at Adil, calling him useless in front of everyone. Every word now felt like a wound that wouldn't heal. He couldn't understand how someone could forgive so easily. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a boss. He just felt like a man who had made a terrible mistake. When he entered the office that day, he noticed that even his own staff didn't look at him the same way. There was no fear or fake respect anymore, just silence. He sat down at his desk and stared at the floor, wondering how to make things right. He wanted to apologize, but he didn't know how. Pride had always been his armor, and now that it was cracked, he didn't know who he was without it. Around noon, Adil walked in. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit or walking with bodyguards. He looked exactly like he always did, calm, simple, and approachable. His quiet presence filled the room, not with power, but with peace. People stood up when he entered, but he smiled and gestured for them to sit. He spoke kindly to the staff, asking if everything was running smoothly, as if nothing unusual had ever happened. When he reached Mr. Rao's office, he stopped at the door. Mr. Rao quickly stood up, unsure what to say. His throat went dry, his palms sweaty. Adil knocked lightly even though the door was open. "May I come in?" he asked politely. That small act broke something inside Mr. Rao. Here was a man he had insulted and humiliated, now asking permission to enter his office. Rao's voice trembled slightly as he said, Please come in." Adil walked in and sat across from him. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The air felt heavy but calm. Finally, Mr. Rao took a deep breath. "Adil, I don't know how to begin," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What I said to you that day, it was wrong. It was cruel. I'm ashamed of myself." Adil looked at him quietly, listening without interrupting. Mr. Rao continued, "I let my ego speak instead of my heart. I've treated people unfairly for a long time, but what I did to you, that was unforgivable." There was a long silence. Adil leaned forward slightly and said, "I forgave you the same day it happened." Mr. Rao blinked, surprised. "How? After the way I spoke to you, how could you forgive me so easily?" Adil smiled gently. "Because holding on to anger doesn't make anyone better. You taught me something that day, even if you didn't mean to. You showed me what happens when someone lets pride take control. And I've seen enough in life to know that everyone deserves a chance to change." Mr. Rao looked down, his eyes wet. "You're a better man than me," he whispered. "No," Adil said softly. "I've just been through things that taught me patience. Life has a way of humbling us when we least expect it. The important thing is that we learn from it." Rao wiped his eyes and nodded slowly. "You did something I never could. You stayed kind even when people treated you badly. I promise I'll change, not just for you, but for myself." Adil placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's all I hope for. Change doesn't start with an apology. It starts with action. Treat your people with respect. Help them grow. That's how you make things right." For the first time, Mr. Rao smiled genuinely. It was small, but it was real. "Thank you," he said. "I'll do better." Adil nodded, stood up, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back and said, "You don't have to thank me. Just make sure no one else ever feels small in this office again." After Adil left, Rao sat alone for a long time, staring out the window. For the first time, he didn't see his reflection as a powerful manager. He saw himself as a man who still had a chance to change, and that realization brought him peace. Over the next few weeks, things slowly began to shift in the office. Mr. Rao started greeting everyone in the morning. He listened to his team instead of ordering them around. He even helped the janitor once when a water bottle spilled in the hallway, something he would have never done before. People noticed. Some were surprised, others inspired. The atmosphere grew lighter, warmer. Adil visited once every few days. He didn't act like a boss. He joined the staff for tea, laughed with them, and asked about their families. He didn't need to demand respect, it came naturally. His quiet presence reminded everyone that true power isn't about control or wealth. It's about kindness. One afternoon, during lunch break, Nita asked him, "Do you ever regret not telling people who you were earlier?" Adil smiled. "No," he said. "If I had told them, they would have treated me differently. I would never have seen their real selves. The truth is, titles and money can hide who people really are. But when you have nothing, that's when you see their true hearts." She nodded thoughtfully. "You changed all of us, you know." He looked at her kindly. "No, you changed yourselves. I just gave you a reason to think." As months passed, the story of what happened spread quietly among the other companies in the area. People spoke about the cleaner who owned the building, and how his humility had changed an entire office. It became a story of respect and perspective, something that reminded people not to judge others by what they see on the surface. One day, a young worker who had just joined the office stopped Adil in the hallway. "Sir, is it true that you were once a cleaner here?" he asked innocently. Adil smiled warmly. "Yes, that's true, but why? You owned the building, right?" He chuckled softly. "Because I wanted to understand how people feel when others look down on them. It's the only way to truly know the value of respect." The young man nodded slowly, clearly inspired. "I'll remember that," he said quietly. "Good," Adil replied. "Always remember, no job makes you small. Only your attitude can do that." That simple sentence spread like a spark among the workers. It became something people repeated to each other whenever someone felt discouraged. Months later, on a sunny Friday morning, the company held a small event to celebrate 5 years of business in that building. The staff had decorated the lobby with balloons and flowers. They invited Adil as the guest of honor. When it was time for speeches, the manager stood at the front. He looked around at the faces that once feared him and took a deep breath. "I want to say something personal before I begin," he said. "Many of you know what happened a while ago. I made mistakes, big ones. I disrespected someone who taught me more about leadership than any training ever could. He showed me that kindness is strength, not weakness. And I'm proud to say that this office is better today because of that lesson." The crowd clapped softly, touched by his honesty. Adil smiled quietly in the audience, his hands folded. When it was his turn to speak, he stood up and walked to the microphone. He didn't speak like a rich man or a property owner. He spoke like a friend. "I'm happy to see how far this place has come," he said. "But more than the success, I'm proud of the people here. You've all learned something precious, that respect is free, but it's worth more than gold." He paused for a moment and looked around. "No one is useless," he continued softly. "Every person adds value in their own way. You may not see it today, but one kind gesture, one word of encouragement can change someone's life. Never forget that." The room was silent. Everyone listened carefully. Some even had tears in their eyes. Adil smiled, nodded once, and stepped away from the microphone. The crowd clapped again, louder this time. It wasn't just applause for a speech. It was for the man who had taught them how to see people differently. Later, as the event ended and people started leaving, Adil quietly walked out of the building. He stopped for a moment near the main gate and looked back. The place that once held memories of pain and humiliation now looked peaceful. He could see people laughing, helping each other, treating one another with kindness. He smiled to himself. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving that kindness can change hearts. He didn't need to own the building to feel proud. He had already built something far more valuable inside those walls: respect. As he walked away under the warm afternoon sun, one sentence echoed in his heart. Real success isn't about what you own. It's about how you make people feel. And that was the truth he had lived by all along.